Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, today is Mock Draft Monday, so I want to make sure that we do that, a Packer 7-round mock. I don't know how long. It shouldn't take too long, although I do want to delve a little bit more into the prospects. Never really know how these things are. They always go differently in my head, so I don't know why I bother explaining it to you, because then it's going to be different, and I regret explaining to you what was about to happen. But the bottom line is I want to try to get a better understanding of these prospects. Number one being sort of just the scouting report, but then also for myself at least taking a couple brief minutes, if I haven't already, checking them out just so I can hopefully sign off and say I like them. Because sometimes, you know, and this happened, I know, a lot last year. It hasn't happened as much so far this year. I'm sure it's going to start happening a lot more regularly. There's certain prospects that are going to be constantly mocked to the Packers that I don't like, so I'm not going to be picking them, and vice versa. You know, I mean, I'm struggling to not just pick Nick Schorton every time in the first round just because he's always there, and as far as value for myself, he's always the best option. But as a fallback for a number two thing, I want to pick up where we left off with what we did however many days ago, it was 2 days ago, with the defensive tackles. Just going for how likely they are to fall to us, the PFF grades, injury history, production, and fit. It's going to be a little bit different, a little bit more laid-back restrictions for edge, although I do want to maybe in the future further refine fit a little bit. But for now, it's basically like if you're one of these 245-pound guys, you get a 2 instead of a 3, and there really are no 1s unless it was like a 225 guy, but there aren't in this case. So more actual fits, I would say, among edge than defensive tackle in the specific category of fit, as well as just kind of across the board guys that I think people would be happy with overall. Even as far as production, the only one out of 3 in the entire category is Abdul Carter being pickable, because he's not in any capacity going to fall to the Packers or even be within tradable range. There's really nothing else that is a 1 out of 3. So plenty of decent enough options. There is another category of my personal grade, however. Everyone except 3 has a grade, and several of them do not have very good grades. But anyways, let's... I don't think there's really any news. Let me just double-check my bookmarks here. Yeah, absolutely nothing. So an uninterrupted mock draft. How about them apples? All right, so why don't we go ahead and dive into this. First round is always going to be probably the least interesting, just because, we do this a lot. It's going to be the same group of names over and over again. We probably will have to have some different discussions based on... You know what, let me do something real quick. There's one thing I'd like to know. I think we'll save this maybe for another day. Maybe today. We'll see. I don't know. But I created a little visualization here with the help of my buddy the robot. And it's basically a heat map that kind of shows the strength of each position in each round. So you can kind of look in a glance, say, okay, if I don't get this position here, you can see it kind of thins out or whatever. For example, if you wanted to be a scumbag like I do, I'm looking at it going, okay, so edge round 1, probably want to do corner round 2, wide receiver round 3, defensive tackle round 4 is your best bet. Could do DT round 1. You know what I mean? Like, you just kind of engineer those top ones based on where they're going to be the deepest, right? So, now, whatever. Let's do the freaking mock draft. All right. Pick 23. And I'm using mock draft database. So, the good to great values here. Tyler Booker is right at 23. The interior guy, I don't think we want to go that route at this point. Josh Simmons at tackle, I'm just not interested. I understand the arguments with the left tackle situation. I'm just not interested. I don't see a scenario really where somebody beats him, and even if they do, I don't think we upgraded as much. Maybe Rasheed Walker, but a little better run blocker, but I don't get it. And then James Pierce and Colston Loveland, tight end, kind of the same thing. So really James Pierce is the only one that would be sort of a fantastic pick, I guess. Now, again, kind of getting back to my little handy-dandy chart here, edge is pretty deep for a while. In fact, it doesn't really start to dip a little bit until round 4, and even then, it's still middle of the pack to slightly high, 4 and 5. 6 is the only round where there's really no edge rushers, but then it's right back to being kind of the standard. So it's pretty consistent. It's just heavy rounds 1 through 3. So the other thing to take into consideration is wide receiver. Round 3 is like loaded. But aside from round 3, it's extremely thin rounds 2, 4, 5. In other words, if you skip round 1, you've got round 3 or round 6 and 7. There's still options, but you got 2 wide receivers in round 2, 2 in round 4, 2 in round 5. I mean, there's 6 total. There's 8 in round 3 alone. So just in terms of, if we have options, which way do you lean? James Pierce is a little iffy for me to begin with. I think having done the exercise that we did a couple days ago, an episode ago or whatever, with the defensive tackles, where there's just not a ton that fit what you're looking for. There's defensive tackles, right? And there's this relatively consistent throughout. Rounds 3 and 4 are probably your best rounds. 3 is the best. But in terms of quality, right? Not just looking for any old defensive tackle. Certainly not looking for a nose tackle, although you can. I'm just saying, in this instance of finding one that's actually going to help you get to the quarterback, I don't know how much help you're going to get. And Derek Harmon is sitting right here. There are other options, just not a ton of them. So I think I'm going to do that. I just want to see how this shakes out. But let's go Derek Harmon, and then move on to pick 54 and see what we got sitting there available for us. So based on the chart here, our 3 best positions are going to be edge, cornerback, and IOL. Corner is the one. So as far as the first 3 rounds, round 2 is where corner thrives. Right, a lot of those guys fell, remember? It's heavy again in round 3 and then 6 and 7. Or 4 and then 6 and 7. So if you're trying to get corner in the first 3 rounds, this is probably your best bet. Now, I know Packer Superfan said if you don't get a wide receiver here, then Gutekunst should be fired, but there really are not options. Our next wide receiver is Jaden Higgins at 65. We're picking at 54. It's not a terrible option, and Higgins will not be there at 87. But at corner, we've got Benjamin Morrison, Azaria Thomas, Darian Porter. Morrison and Thomas are not my favorite in the history of the universe, but I kind of want to just stick to what we're doing here to see if we can end up with a solid draft. So I do want to take one of these guys. I'm tempted to take Darian Porter, but I'll tell you what, let's take Benjamin Morrison. The injury thing is a concern, but he's just 21 years old. He was a top cornerback in 2022, and by top I just mean, graded out extremely well in 22 and 23, but you figure he's 21, go back 3, so at 19 years old, the guy was maybe even 18. He was a very, very good corner. So, all right, Benjamin Morrison going on to pick 87 in round 3. This is where I'm looking. You got wide receiver and edge are the 2 that make the most sense. Wide receiver really falls off in the next round. Edge is not ridiculously strong, but you still got options in the next couple of rounds. So wide receiver is the one where you really want to look. And I think because of how many there are, some of the guys fell that I didn't think would. Jalen Noel and Jalen Royals are both here, along with Restrepo, Savion Williams, Tez Johnson. And the other good thing is we got 2 guys that got some decent speed, in Royals and Jalen Noel, especially in Jalen Noel. In fact, he was pretty phenomenal across the board, aside from being 5'10", 194, was really the only knocks against the guy. So the question of, could Jalen Noel be kind of a speedster type with some maybe higher end upside in other capacities? I think possibly. So let's go ahead and draft Jalen Noel out of Iowa State, kind of the lesser talked about Iowa State wide receiver. By the way, also with a solid drop rate. It's in the 4% range. So, pick 124. We are now in the fourth round. The top option would be corner. So we could possibly double up if needed. I think with the addition in free agency, that's a slightly lesser need. Edge still has not been addressed. Savion Jones, Ashton Galati, which I think is a decent option. David Walker, I just watched today. Kind of torn on. He's okay, but Central Arkansas scares me. Tyler Barron, did I just watch him? These guys are right on the edge of like the guys because I went to the top 200 and we're right in that range now. And I'll tell you what, there's kind of a perfect option here for me personally. And like I said, we'll probably get to this list after we do the mock draft. But on the scale of 1 to 3, 1 being does not fit, 2 being somewhere in between, and 3 being solid, good to go. One of the few that checks every box. In fact, he might be the only, he's one of 2 that checks every box, as well as having like a 7 or higher out of 10 grade for me. And Ashton Galote, however you say it, is one of them. So I did a scale out of 10, but it's not like a normal scale where basically the bottom is like a 5.5 or 6. Like it goes to actual 0. So 7 is pretty solid. He checks all the other boxes too, as far as PFF and everything else. I mean, the guy is 6'3", 275, 88 PFF grade, 90 pass rush grade, 57 pressures on 363 attempts. The sacks were not as high. I didn't ding him on that because the pressure rate is so unbelievably high. And the year before he had 9, which is pretty close to double digits. So I figure that's good enough. He plays defensive end. That was the other thing I wanted to refine as far as fit. Is, if they're stand-up outside linebackers, maybe drop them down to a 2, just because it's a potential issue there, but he would even check that box. So I think he's a solid guy, and even some of his better games came against some of the better competition, because you play some really good teams, some really bad teams, but like Kentucky was his best game. That's not that's not Austin Peay or whatever. Or Jayville State. So that's what we're going to do. Ashton Galotti. And this is also a decent double-up opportunity looking at my sheet here because, like I said, Edge is about as stacked in round 4 as it is round 5, and since we haven't addressed it, this feels like a decent opportunity to do that. A lot of the same guys are still there. David Walker, Central Arkansas, Tyler Barron, Miami, Antoine Powell, Ryland, Virginia Tech. Barron Sorrell out of Texas, I think might be the other guy. I don't think I liked him. Oh, no. It wasn't Barron Sorrell. He was fine. That's not a bad option, actually. Looks like Braden Swinson is gone. That would have been a decent option. I actually think that might be what I'm going to do here. The PFF grade is the only one that's a 2 out of 3. But the injuries, the production, the fit, and I give him a 6.5 out of 7. But 6'4", 260 pounds. He plays down defensive end. 49 pressures and 9 sacks on 362 attempts, which is fantastic. And even the 2 out of 3, it's not bad PFF grades. He had a 73 run defense and a 75 pass rush. It's just kind of borderline. It's good, not great in both categories. I mean, you could call it a 3 if you wanted to. I think that's a solid. I think it's a solid pick, and I like the double up when you can't get everything at the front end. So if you miss, it's not a terrible idea to kind of double up at that point. And Barron Sorrell is probably my favorite at this point, aside from the ones I haven't seen. It's the first one that, by the way, they didn't like me taking, probably because I already have an edge, but gave me a C+. If I was trying to go for straight A's, I could have done something else, but I'm happy with that. So at this point, we haven't really touched offensive line. We could do that. We didn't draft any last year. We do need some more depth. We got a guy, right? But we also lost a guy. So we still need some depth there. Linebacker is an option. Otherwise, we're kind of just looking to double up. Maybe another wide receiver, maybe another corner, maybe another defensive tackle, kind of whatever's there. So let's see where we're at. Looks like round 6. Wide receiver heavy. Running back, I don't care. Wide receiver corner. And then possibly D-line. Looks like all of them are going to stay about as full. So let's just see what we got here. Oh, and right at the top, we got Mr. J.J. Piguez, or whatever his name is, who I think was a nose tackle, if I'm not mistaken, I get him and some other guy confused for some reason. I got to learn how to say these guys' names, too, because it's getting to be annoying dragging these out. Yeah, so 6'2", 325 out of Ole Miss. I don't think I'm allowed to do mock drafts without picking an Ole Miss player. This would be a TJ Slaton replacement. And it's very similar to TJ Slaton, too. Although Slaton was like a better pass rusher in college than in the pros, and that always annoyed me. And everybody was like, oh, no, he's a pass rusher. And it's like, I get it. I get what you're saying because he showed something, and then his stats kind of point one way. But a guy is not he's not built to be a pass rusher in the NFL. And so he's like an oversized pass rusher that couldn't make it as a pass rusher, and they tried to fit him in as a run defender, and he wasn't good at it. This guy's actually built to be a run defender. 82 run defense grade, 66 pass rush. He did have 31 pressures on 293 attempts, which, again, is still sort of the TJ Slaton standard of decent enough stats, especially for a guy that's 325 pounds. You know, not a 340-pound useless nose tackle that can't move and just kind of stays anchored. You know, he's rocking an 11% pressure rate or whatever it is, but also just happens to be really solid. I think it's a decent option. Chase Lunt, tackle. I would feel weird. And we got a couple interior guys here, a bunch of them actually. Willie Lampkin, Clay Webb, Joshua Gray. Holy blazing glory here. This is the pick. That's not even close. I don't think I've ever looked at this guy before. Willie Lampkin, 5'11", 290, 89 pass blocking, 88 run blocking. He's been a consistently good pass blocker and run blocker for 5 years, including 3 at Coastal Carolina, 2 at North Carolina. He's played left guard, center, and right guard. 1,700 left guard snaps, 937 center snaps, 1,473 right guard snaps. Plays all along the offensive line for 2 different schools and excels in pass and run blocking at both small and bigger schools. This could not be... I haven't seen him personally. I haven't watched interior offense or any offensive line yet, but that is the easiest slam dunk decision I've ever seen in my entire life. Then we got our 2 7th-round picks here. Right at the top, we got wide receivers, so that kind of worked to our advantage like we were hoping. We've got one corner in Justin Wally, if that happened to work out, but looks like we're being pushed toward wide receiver, which, again, I'm not mad about. We kind of had that work in our favor here. It looks like what was expected to be would be linebacker, safety, wide receiver. I'm not seeing that as much, but that's okay. So let's take a look at our wide receivers. Keandre Lambert-Smith, Ricky White, UNLV, Jalen Lane. A lot of Jalen's at wide receiver in this class. Out of Virginia Tech. In that group, we got 2 additional speedsters here. Jalen Lane, all the Jalen's are fast. 4.34 40. But he is 5 foot, about 5'1", 191. That's really small. I think if I had to go in that direction, Keandre Lambert-Smith would make more sense. He ran a 4.37, which again is blazing fast. He's 6 foot 190. That's a little bit more manageable. I know speed isn't the be-all, end-all, but I'm just trying to think in terms of we're trying to find a Christian Watson replacement. We did already get Jalen Noel, so you're hoping that can be the situation. I don't really know. We might just be taking multiple swings at it. Ricky White is the other wide receiver here at the top 3, and he had like a 2 RAS, so I didn't even bother looking. And it looks like Keandre Lambert-Smith is kind of used more as a deep threat option, and being sort of the bigger guy, I think I prefer that, and just kind of hope he can be sort of an MVS. He's not as big, he's not as tall, but yeah, it looks like Jalen Lane is rocking a 12.3 yards per reception. Keandre Lambert-Smith is closer to 20. So I think I'm just going to do that. I just want to double check and make sure there's not like a couple solid linebackers or anything here. There's like none. Again, this is sort of the expected layout based on where the consensus board is. But if people start grabbing all the linebackers or whatever, then that's, especially in a group where there's just not a lot of them. In fact, there's one per round at linebacker until round 4. So, yeah, teams might just start getting desperate for stuff like that. But, all right, Keandre Lambert-Smith, we got one final pick at 250, so it should be mostly the same group. Let's check offensive line again. Yeah, there's not a ton. All right, let's just do this. Rather than a third receiver or too much of a reach, why don't we just take corner Mello Dotson out of Kansas? Packers have been swinging at corner in the 7th round quite a bit. Finally got one to pan out in Valentine. Let's see if we can replicate that. So I think it, in a lot of ways, did kind of pan out. You can certainly play with that a little bit, go edge early and see how it pans out. But it was nice to see. It's kind of like counting your cards in Vegas or whatever. You know, the right cards just keep coming when you follow the system. But it helps to know kind of where it's deep in certain areas, because a lot of times you do the mock drafts blind, and you're like, oh, I'll just wait for this position because it's lesser of a need, and it just never comes. And you end up just massively reaching just to fulfill, a perceived need at a perceived value. But Derek Harmon in the 1st round, followed by corner Benjamin Morrison. Then Jalen Noel, the wide receiver. Ashton Gallotti at edge. Baron Sorrell at edge. Willie Lampkin at interior. Keandre Lambert-Smith, wide receiver, and then Mello Dotson at corner. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. So first of all, why don't we actually just go through this thing that I just created to kind of get an idea. We'll just do position by position here. It basically, all I did was took the consensus big board, did rounds 1 through 7, and then you got the undrafted free agents. So at long snapper, it looks like there are 0 in rounds 1 through 7, punter 0, and kicker 0. There are 7 total, so that would be 7 undrafted free agent long snappers, 12 undrafted punters, and 13 undrafted kicker options. At quarterback, it's very evenly distributed, but not necessarily in a good way. It's 2, 2, 2, 1, 3, 1, 1, right? If you were to match that up with like a value chart, though, where, if you don't get one in the 1st round, you're screwed, it's not great, right? Just having 2 up front. Now, I do think Dart is probably going to go round 1, but this is just where it's situated right now. This is obviously subject to change. There are 21 undrafted free agent quarterbacks, so 33 total quarterbacks in this top 600 list or whatever. At tight end, it's 2, 2, 2, 1, 4, 4, 1. So rounds 5 and 6 are where you get a little bit more, but very, very few tight ends, and certainly none very early. So not a very good tight end class. Offensive tackle, and obviously this is disputed, who's tackle, who's interior, whatever, but 4-3-4, 0-4-3-2. So pretty even all the way across, which is one very weird round 4 where there just aren't any, and it does taper in rounds 6 and 7, but otherwise pretty even. At running back, it's 2-2-3, 5-4, 6-4. So kind of weak in the first 3 rounds, but then picks up pretty heavily. So if you're just kind of looking for I know a lot of Packer fans are just looking for one more random guy to plug in. It's a very good draft for that. There's 7 running backs in the first 3 rounds. There's 5 in the next round, 10 in the 2 rounds after that. Linebacker, 1-1-1, 4-5-2-6. So very similarly, almost none in the first 3 rounds. Pretty decent for the Packers looking for, an additional kind of depth piece, whatever, / special teamer. So you got 3 in the first 3 rounds, followed by 9 in the next 2 rounds. Then a little bit of a dip, and then you got 6 in that final round and 7. Edge is front-loaded and very loaded at that. 7, 5, 6. So 18 edge rushers in the first 3 rounds, which is shocking. And again, it does dip, but not even that much. Then 4 and 4, so then you got 8 more in the next 2 rounds. Then 2, and then 4 more. So just a bunch of edge rushers in this class, especially early on. And that kind of goes to what on Packernet After Dark yesterday, I think. I think Beer Cheese Benny was kind of talking about, maybe there is a little bit more confidence in the edge class. Cornerback, it's 3-6-2, 7-1, 6-5. So very up and down. Not a ton round 1, a bunch round 2, then very few round 3, and then a bunch round 4, and then 1, and then rounds 6 and 7, you got a bunch. So pretty sporadic, but relatively consistent throughout when you factor in just at some, it never just completely falls off a cliff. Interior, kind of weird. You got 1-5-2, 4-5-3-1. So not a lot of early options. Then you got a bunch in round 2, and then it kind of tapers a little bit round 3. Then you got this window of rounds 4, 5, and 6 where you got kind of a good option, a good pile, and then round 7 you got nothing. So I guess what you would say is rounds 4, 5, and 6 are kind of the sweet spot, although round 2 is also pretty loaded. So if you happen to get one round 2, great. For the sake of the Packers, it's probably not as big of a pressing need, so you just skip round 2, you wait for the sweet spot, rounds 4, 5, and 6, and that's when you can start to find some of your depth. Safety is very weird, very consistently low until the 7th round. It's 2-1-2, 3-3-2, 7. Defensive line, there's also a pretty big pile and pretty consistent. In fact, the lowest you're going to find is 3, which I don't know if any other position has that, including edge. But it's 4-3, 6-5, 3-4-4. So there's a pretty consistent average of 4 defensive tackles. You've got 6 in round 3 and 5 in round 4. That's probably your best window to have your 11 defensive tackles in that window. Not really day 3, but 3-4 window. And then wide receiver is weird because it's very backloaded, in which a large portion around 6 and 7, but you've got 4 in round 1 and 8 in round 3. So there's that big pile where a lot of talented guys are at. And again, it's kind of a sliding scale. Some of these guys are probably second round picks, some of them are probably whatever. But as of the consensus board right now, the danger around it is that if you don't grab one in that pile, there's not a lot around it. So it's 4-2, 8-2-2. So if you don't get a first round guy and you're hoping, we'll just wait till the 3rd round, and it doesn't happen for whatever reason, somebody's better or whatever, you're probably not going to have another opportunity until the end of the draft. And so you're just kind of out of the game. And for the Packers picking at the end of the 2nd round, you got to be real worried, because if you don't pick one in the first 2 rounds, you're not picking again until the end of the 3rd round. So you're that group of 8 is largely probably depleted. Looking at the totals overall from least to most, let's do undrafted free agents here. So after the draft is all done, 21 quarterbacks, 19 tight ends, 25 tackles, 34 running backs, 30 edge rushers, so there's not actually a ton in undrafted free agency, 33 corners, 40 linebackers, 43 interior offensive linemen, 45 safeties, 47 defensive linemen, and 52 wide receivers. Wide receivers by far the most numerous in this class, but just a lot of them kind of start in the 6th round. Overall totals, so the draft plus the UDFAs, you got 7 long snappers, 12 punters, 13 kickers, 33 quarterbacks, 35 tight ends, 45 tackles, and then a big jump up, 60 running backs. So, tackle is really weak. 60 running backs, 60 linebackers, 62 edge rushers, 63 corners, 64 interior offensive linemen, 65 safeties, 76 defensive linemen, 83 wide receivers. Just 2 massive jumps there. So you got kind of your lower tier special, whatever. Then you got your next lowest tier is quarterback, tight end. Then tackle is then kind of a low tier by itself. Then running back, linebacker, edge, corner, interior offensive line, and safety are kind of the mid-high tier. Then defensive line is a big jump up, and then wide receiver is a big jump up from that. But again, for wide receiver, before the 6th round, you really just have that one pile, plus, a handful in the 1st round or whatever. Who knows how many will even be there by the time the Packers pick, though. So, all right, let's take our final break. We'll come back. I want to go through my little edge list here, just to kind of show who checks what boxes where. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so for those of you that are new here that missed the defensive tackle episode, let me just real quickly run through once again what it is that I did here. I wanted to be able to visualize quickly and contextualize some important things. So obviously, one of the things that I like to do is go and actually watch these guys and then put some kind of a grade. I hate doing it because I don't freaking know. I actually had the robot come up with a 10-point scale just so I can, when I decide what to put on it, I just go read it. Because there's descriptions there, and I read which description seems the most correct, and then if it fits nicely, like in a 6, I'll give it a 6. If it's right in between, it's a 6.5. If it's not quite, but it's closer to a 7 than a 6, then it's like a 6.75. But the only thing I want is to be able to go back and then look at it and see, okay, this is how much I liked them, and this is what that meant. And I try to put some kind of a notes there to be the further context of what I liked and what I didn't. But there's other important things here. One of them is, does PFF like them? Because a lot of times I'll look at it, I don't remember if PFF gave them good grades or not. Do they have injury issues? Production for defensive tackles and edge rushers in particular is a big one when it comes to pass rush, which is really all I care about. Yes, run defense, there are stats for all different kinds of categories, but really what I want to know is, are you checking the box for good pass rush numbers? This is very subjective. It's my standards, my thoughts, and it's anytime I do any project, it's shocking how much gray area there is. Every time I think I've created a nice little thing, within 2 to 3 prospects, I'll find something, and it's like, I don't freaking know. Man, maybe I should make it out of 5 or this or that. But that's all it is. And then finally is fit. This had more to do with defensive tackle, just because a lot of these guys were more nose tackles, which isn't really what I was looking for, 340-pound guys. I decided to keep that category and really just make it, are they sort of the undersized, 245-pound types? And like I said, I'd like to further refine that so that it's, sort of a 1, 2, 3, where a 3 is good size and they play defensive end. 1 is undersized and plays outside linebacker. And then some combination would be a 2, a 245-pound guy that kind of plays both ways, or a 260-pound guy that plays outside linebacker, that would be a 2, whatever. But I'm not going to do that right now because I finished it and I don't want to go all the way back through each and every one of these guys right now. And then for this, which I didn't have for the defensive tackles, but I decided to bring it in because it made sense, is my grades. So I will go based on the current consensus big board rankings. I have the top 200 prospects, and it is updated to what today is, so it's not the old list like it was for defensive tackle. And then also Tyler Batty is in here just because he was already on here. And again, I don't know if he's at 227 right now. I didn't really get a chance to watch him. I don't have a grade for him, but he's here, and I added the stuff to it. So Abdul Carter is currently consensus 2. It's not really worth talking about. There's no way he falls even far enough for us to trade enough to get up. He's a fun guy to watch. Probably not like the biggest slam dunk I've ever seen in my life, but if you watch it the way that I like to do it, which is from the lowest up, because sometimes you watch Abdul Carter and you it's easy to just kind of see flaws and go, I don't really get it, and then you just go through and everybody kind of looks like they suck. Start from the bottom, work your way up, and then you'll really start to appreciate some of these better prospects. By the time I got to Abdul Carter, I was like, okay, that's pretty impressive. But again, he does check every box: PFF, the injuries, production, fit, etc. By the way, injuries, I said this about defensive tackles too, but just as a reminder, pretty much everybody has some kind of injuries. If you missed a game or two, I don't super care. Again, there's some subjectivity there. If you missed, what's kind of on the line, I'll look at previous years. If you've been healthy through previous years, I'll let it go. Nobody was a 1 here, so it's kind of subjective, but it's just a snapshot, just so I know right away. All right, getting to Jalen Walker, who's at 12. And by the way, there are no 1s anywhere on this list anymore, so it's just 3s or 2s, which are, not the end of the world, but could be better. Jalen Walker has 2s for 3 out of the 5. The injuries are okay. The production is okay. He's a 2 out of 3 as far as being pickable because he's probably gone. PFF was not super high on him, and the fit, being a smaller guy, is not fantastic. That to me is not great for a guy that's as early as he is. And I understand the comps that he gets, and I understand the upside and the hype that he gets. There's just a lot of things that would make me a little bit nervous as compared to some of the other guys that we wouldn't have to really reach for. Shamar Stewart, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. He is similar. There's the pickable issue. PFF was not massively impressed with him. He is a better scheme fit being a bigger guy, but the production wasn't great. He had 39 pressures on 315 attempts, which isn't terrible. First of all, there's a higher standard in college. If you're at like 10, 11, 12%, that's not that good. I'm not going to ding you for it. The problem is he had 2 sacks. And if that was kind of a fluke, because some of the guys, they'll have, like I mentioned even earlier, one of the guys had like 4 sacks or something, but he had 9 the year before. It's fine. He had 2 sacks. The year before that, he had 2 sacks. The year before that, he had 2 sacks. He has 6 total sacks in 3 seasons at Texas A&M. And as far as the PFF grades, he had an 88 run defense grade, but a 67 pass rush grade. And the year before that, it was a 63 run defense, 74 pass rush. The year before that, it was a 37 run defense and a 59 pass rush. So, no, I'm not giving him 3 out of 3 for PFF at all. Mykel Williams, he had I went kind of heavy with the 2 out of 3 as far as pickable because I don't really know. I don't know who's going and who's staying or what. PFF liked him. The other potential issues were injuries and production because the fit was fine. So, and again, injuries were kind of on the line, but I'm looking at, some of these guys are like 500 to 600 snaps. He had 400, and I saw that he missed 3 or 4 games early. And then the year before that, he had 381 and then 407. It doesn't necessarily have to do with injury. Maybe he wasn't starting. I don't know. But either way, I decided to ding him for that. He missed time, and he's never really had a full season. So some potential concerns there that could use some additional digging. And then as far as production, 26 pressures on 250 attempts. That's like exactly 10%, which isn't great. And then just 5 sacks, and that's pretty standard for him. He had 26 on 240 the year before. Again, we're sitting right at 10% and 6 sacks. His rookie year was the best at 33 on 288, but again, just 6 sacks. So the production has never really been all that fantastic. And, a big part of the reason I did this is because this had more to do with the fans than me. It's still my subjective standard, but a lot of fans are annoyed that, well, there's just not a lot of guys that, or we never draft guys that have, like, production, The problem is a lot of guys lack production. And so finding people that PFF loves and have good production and don't have injury issues and they're not old, I didn't even add age to this list, but I certainly could, which are the things that people are going to pick at if Brian Gutekunst picks somebody. It's not easy. Another thing I was thinking of adding was school. So you just split it into 3. I'd have the robot do it, but just go out and find a list of the school rankings and just say break them up into thirds. So, the smaller school guys will get a little bit more dinged and, again, put age on it. But by the time you look at every single checkbox that people could nitpick at, finding somebody that checks all the boxes is going to be nearly impossible. Which brings me to Mike Green. He's a 2 as far as pickable because he might be gone. And then fit also could be an issue. School would be an issue, although that's not on here. But everything else he checks. And even the fit is close. I mean, I should actually check. I didn't cross-reference with RAS. But let me just look really quick. I'm just going based off PFF because I was kind of just flying through it. Yeah, so I actually did make it sub 250. Again, just being very broad with it. He actually did weigh in at 251. On PFF here, he's at 248. So actually, he would be fine with that. I'll just change it right now. I'll give him a 3. Only because there might be an ideal weight of like 265 for a defensive end or whatever it is. I don't really know. But I'm not talking about ideal. I just want to make sure that they check the box of not being an undersized guy. And I don't think 251 is necessarily undersized for a defensive end. I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I called it. But everything else checks out. The problem is, again, being a smaller school, you kind of expect it to. But 59 pressures and 17 sacks on 354 attempts is fantastic. 92 PFF grade, 90 run defense, 91 pass rush. Yes, he checks all the boxes. It's just a question of how much you care based on him playing for a smaller school. Then you got James Pierce, number 19 overall out of Tennessee. Aside from pickable, fit was the issue. Again, let me cross-reference that, though. Yeah, he still came in at 245, which is about the expected, so I did put him as a little bit undersized. Again, we're getting nitpicky between 245 and 250, but there's got to be a line somewhere. But everything else pretty well checked out. He's in the 80s in both pass rush and run defense. In fact, he's pretty close to a 90 in pass rush. 55 pressures and 8 sacks on 254 attempts is phenomenal. Zero Aku, the only thing he didn't fit was fit. And actually, let me check because he's close also. They're all going to be close. There's only a handful that didn't, so I might as well check them. He's 248. Sorry, dog. You got to stay there. Oh, and I forgot to go over my grades, but it's fine. Let me just get us caught up here. So Abdul Carter did get a 10. Jalen Walker, I had an 8.5, which is above and beyond most of these guys. The rest are all pretty close. Shamar, 7.3. Michael Williams, 7.5. Mike Green and James Pierce are at a 7. Zero Aku also at a 7.5. Which brings us to Nick Schorton, who I have at an 8.5. So I have him tied with Jalen Walker, actually. And there's another guy that I have a little further down that also is in that category. But the only thing he does not fit is the production. He's a good fit, injury, PFF, and probably being pickable, but I don't know. And he's the last one that I kind of have a 2 out of 3. Everybody else is a 3 out of 3, should make it. But the grades are fine. He's 80s pass rush, mid-70s run defense. The problem is 36 pressures on 316 attempts, which is fine. In the NFL, that's not bad, but just 4 sacks. The year before, he did have 8, which, again, it's kind of on the fence, but you're looking at 14 pressures in 3 years, so a little under 5 a year, although rookie year doesn't really count, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of iffy. It's kind of the combination of barely being above 10% and having sub 5 on sacks. But you pair that with the fact that PFF says, no, he's actually a really good pass rusher and very consistent and all that stuff. I feel pretty good about it. I like him. I think the problem with the fit side is that it would actually bring him down because he actually plays outside linebacker. I don't know if he did at Purdue or not. Let me check real quick. Yeah, so he would actually be... Even though he's 285 pounds or whatever his official weight was, the fact that he played outside linebacker would make it less of a fit. So I'll just go ahead and switch it, fine. Landon Jackson hit everything except production. 22 pressures on 221 attempts. I mean, actually that was the year prior. 35 on 362. So it's 10% 2 years ago or last year, whatever. And then this current year, last year, however you want to freaking phrase it, 2024, he was actually sub 10%. Now, the sacks are decent, but that's not good to be that low. And actually, I gave him PFF got better the next year. But I actually was pretty low on him. I gave him a 6.5. In fact, him, Jack Sawyer, and Umanmielen, not a huge fan of. Jack Sawyer, Ohio State, actually 3s across the board. The next several are all 3s across the board. Jack Sawyer, but again, a 6 for me. And then Umanmielen, also 3s across the board, a 6. Then we get to Mr. Princely Umanmielen, whatever. He is 3s across the board, and I gave him an 8.5. I really like him. So that is... aside from Abdul Carter, that's the highest grade I gave out. I gave it to Nick Schorton and Jalen Walker. Brady Swinson, also 3s across the board, but a 6.5 is what I gave him. Then you get to Kyle Kennard out of South Carolina. His production did not hit, and I gave him a 2.5, which is the worst grade I gave anybody. He and Ja Joyner, I gave just a 2.5. 2.5 is basically, under no circumstance do I have any interest. There's no sort of, maybe in these circumstances, maybe this. It's just, I don't like him, period. At 83, Josiah Stewart, he missed on scheme fit as well as having injury issues. That's out of Michigan, although I really did like him. He's kind of a smaller speed guy. He was one of the first ones I saw, technically the second that I saw early on that I really liked. So the size might end up being a bit of an issue. And again, injury stuff, but I gave him a 7.6. So that was higher than guys like Mike Green and James Pierce, just to be clear. Olawafemi Oladejo, I did not get to see any tape from him or anything, so I don't have anything, and he missed on production and PFF, so safe to say he's not my favorite. Savion Jones out of LSU, missed on PFF and production, and I gave him a 3. Really did not like him. Jared Ivey just misses on production. I gave him a 6.5. Mentioned Ashton Galoti. That was the first one that I saw that I really liked, and he's 3s across the board. So for a later round guy, all 3s across the board, and I gave him a 7 out of 10. I'm a big fan. David Walker out of Central Arkansas, I just watched today. It's kind of iffy, especially when you don't do it for a long time to make sure that you're kind of sticking with the scale and everything. But the Central Arkansas thing just kind of threw me off. He wasn't my favorite to begin with, but he was decent, and I tried not to let the Central Arkansas thing throw me, but I had to let it influence me a little bit, so I just gave him a 6. After that, there's really nobody I necessarily like. Tyler Barron is 3s across the board. David Walker is too, by the way, which again, smaller school it happens. But Tyler Barron out of Miami, all 3s. But I gave him a 4 grade. Antoine Powell Ryland missed on PFF grades. I gave him a 3.5. Ja Joyner missed on PFF and production. I gave him a 2.5. Baron Sorrell missed on PFF. I gave him a 6.5. Kaimon Rucker missed on PFF and had injury stuff. I gave him a 6.5. Fadel Diggs out of Syracuse missed on PFF. I gave him a 4. And then finally, Tyler Batty. I have not had a chance to see him, but he misses on PFF and production. So as far as the guys that do hit on production, it is most, which is good. But guys that hit on production and PFF and should be available to us and are, scheme fit, and I like them. I mean, you'd have your own scale, but it's Umanmielen or Umanmielen or whatever, and that's pretty close to it. That and Mr. Galoti, and we could say Mike Green, although he kind of makes me a little bit nervous, but I did give him a 7, and he's 3s on everything except the pickable thing, but that's kind of, if he's there, he's there, A little bit of an asterisk next to his name, though, is all, so. That's what I got so far. Got to go through a bunch more positions. We'll probably have different standards for different groups and what we're looking for there. I don't know production as far as, if you're looking at corners. And we probably won't do every position, but I do want to do corner and wide receiver for sure, because those are kind of the biggest needs. But for today, I am going to get out of here. You guys have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.